nothing else, only Excel. So you can publish individual applications for your users, and you can say, oh, this is telling me for a license. Yeah, well, I don't have a license, so that's fine. We close that down. But yeah, that's just showing you we only are publishing. You can see the application is showing up right at the front there. So that's one way to connect. Another way to connect is you can download what we call the Microsoft Azure Remote Desktop Client. And I will bring that up and I'll share that screen with you because I don't think you can see it on that screen. Can you see it on the screen? No. So let me share it with you again. Yeah, just give me a sec. I'll share it with you. Go to the window and I will click on my. And as you can see now, I've got my remote desktop client. I can click subscribe and I could go ahead and I could log in with that user. I could say that user would be AVD lab at co.nz. I could go ahead, click next, type that person's password in, and click OK. And I think I've signed that person user, and I'll say ask later. So now I would now my users at work have this. They've got two ways to access. They can access a web browser or straight with the remote desktop client app, and that will open up the desktop out of a web browser. That'll open up the application out of a web browser. So there's that workspace. Again, I could click on here and I could come down here and I could subscribe and add another multiple workspaces at the end of the day. So again, that's just giving you a basic understanding of how to use that. So there are many ways to connect with your virtual desktop environment. It all depends on you as the architect as you're going through. Again, if I come down here, I can turn stuff on or off. I can download an RDP file, and that's a special RDP file that I can push out. I could enable native display. I can come down here and choose certain things. How do I want things to work? You know, again, I could go full screen mode. Could move that out the way. I could do feedback. I could pin stuff, and of course, I could come into here and do a whole lot of other bits and pieces. So again, it's all about giving you guys that basic foundation of how to use your Azure Virtual Desktop. And as you can see, there's a little bit to it as you go through deploying stuff. Again, coming into your host pools and workspaces, they all need to be tied in, otherwise you are not going to connect at all. So that about it for the lab. Not too much, but at least I hope I haven't made you guys go insane. And you know,
Brian, I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to know what the advantages and disadvantages between you said logging in, I think directly, and logging in remotely. What are the advantages and disadvantages between the two? That's the first question.
Okay, the first question is if you use the Microsoft Remote Desktop Client, which you can download from the Microsoft Azure website, you just type in Azure Remote Desktop Client. That means you're not logging through a web browser. You're actually connecting directly to the virtual machine. You can open your application without having opening up any web browser. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can connect. That's much easier for the user.
I see.
The second one that I showed you, or the first one I showed you, is using a web browser. In case I don't want to put a client on your machine, you might have someone that's a contractor. You can say to a contractor, right, you use the web portal, and think of the Azure web portal as webmail. Then you've got Exchange, but in order to get your email, it's easier to have Outlook installed on your machine. So think of Outlook as the remote desktop client, and think of webmail as the web client for virtual desktop. So you might say to someone else, here you go, you can use the web portal, or you can download the client, and then if they download the client, then they can connect to your environment. You can say, right, you need to add the client with these credentials. So normally for my staff, we use the remote desktop client. It's a lot easier and a lot smoother for them, and because they work at the company. But if you have people that are working outside of the environment, then then it becomes a bit of a pain, because you might say, well, I'm not going to grant you access to my environment because I don't know you. You're just a contractor, but I will allow you access via the portal. So, like I say, at the end of the day, it all depends on you as that individual on how you want to set up stuff. So yes, there is a difference. They do the same thing. It's just up to you what you want to do.
I think you said it best. I think that as a best practice, that for organizations, if for contractors who's there on a term basis, should link in by remote. So thank you for that.
Cool.
The second question I have is, and I apologize if you answered this earlier or shared this earlier, because I was a little late. What are some use cases when to use virtual machines?
Okay, virtual machines are great for when you're deploying servers. I use them when I'm deploying a server. I use virtual
a server or servants?
Server, a Windows server. If you want to use virtual machines, a Windows server. If you want to deploy a single virtual machine for testing, you can. That's absolutely fine. It's great if you can also do it if you want to, if there's a one of, or it's 2 or 3 machines that you want to, like admin machines that you want to use to do your own stuff on, then you can. But for your users, you would want to use virtual desktops because it's a lot cheaper. There's a big cost. For example, if you deploy a Windows virtual machine, it's about $100 a month for a Windows 10 desktop. If I deploy it in Azure, it's $9. Big cost saving. And not only that, it comes with the desktop straight away. It's easier to manage, and you can then also you can lock it down with publishing applications. Where if you deploy a Windows desktop, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops and to try and publish applications, and that you can't publish applications on a virtual machine. Virtual machine is, there's my desktop. Like you'll go to the shop and you'll buy a computer, and the computer comes with stuff. If you want to lock stuff down, you've got to set up group policy, join it to a domain, and if you're joining that to a domain, that's okay. But if I've got, if I want to save money, I'll deploy a virtual desktop because straight away I don't have to deploy 10 VMs, because I can get 10 people logging onto one VM. So again, where I use virtual desktops or a virtual machine, as you call it, is if I'm deploying a Microsoft Windows server, or there's a contractor. You could even deploy a contract, say, well, there's your machine. It's separated, still on the network, but you've got your own environment. We don't need to set up a desktop for you, an AVD.
I know the one case that I remember having a virtual machine is the company was deploying. We were hybrid kind of speak. We were rolling out Microsoft 365 in phases to people throughout the organization. And because I was, in IT, I needed to have both versions. And so my primary desk was what everybody else had, the older version, and I had another machine that actually had me access to, I can't remember what version we were on. Let's just say if I was on Windows 11, and then I had another machine on Windows 10, because we have not rolled it out to everyone in the organization yet. That was the only personal experience I had with virtual machine. I wasn't sure what was some others.
I mean, absolutely. That's what I do as well. Before I deploy stuff, I put it in a virtual machine. I test it, I drive it. I might deploy that virtual machine to say, I might deploy, say, 5 virtual machines and give people access to those 5 VMs to test drive and see how they find it before you go live. But yes, in the real world, like I say, you will have virtual machines that have their place. You want to, like I say, test stuff. You might have contractors that use it. It depends on you at the end of the day. But normally the big difference between a virtual machine and an AVD desktop is money. It's price. So that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It also comes down to better management. And again, more importantly, if you are publishing an application and the person only needs access to an application, then it's better to go to AVD. If you trust the person with a desktop, say, I want you to test this and tell me what you think, you can put Office on it, because you might want to deploy something. You might, for example, wanting to do Linux. Now, as you notice, AVD does not do Linux. It only does Windows. So you might have a Linux box or a web server that you want to test. Then you would use a virtual desktop. You might want to deploy Oracle or Kali Linux for penetration testing and ethical hacking and security. So again, you can't use an AVD for that. That's where virtual machines come in. So virtual machines definitely have their place, and it's up to you to decide where you want to do it. But how you've done it is how I've done it in the real world as well. I've had a Windows 10 machine, a Windows 11 VM running with my Windows 10. I've tested applications before I've rolled out stuff. I've actually created 5 virtual machines, or for a small pool of different people to test. What do you think? Yep, that's all good. And then you look at rolling out that production. So good if you're wanting to practice migrating data from one side to another side, because you don't want to do that until you're 100% sure. So again, also with virtual machines, I use them a lot with servers because we manage servers in Hyper-V. You can use a virtual machine system center to manage that as well. So there's a lot of things that come into play. So virtual machines do have its place and they do have a functionality. But for you and me as engineers, your standard user, put them on an AVD, give them applications, unless you are wanting to test drive stuff or you've got something unique, then you deploy a standard Windows VM.
You prompted another question. I'm sorry with all the questions, but my mind get going, and I'm thinking of the folks that's on the call as well. Do you see virtual machines being used for larger organizations versus for small and mid-sized companies, or do you see it like an even playing field among the small, medium, and large organizations?
I think it's between you and me. I think that's an even playing field, because it all depends on your organization's needs. Big companies, most companies, if it's users, they will use AVD, whether it's a small company or a big company. Obviously, if you've got a small company with, say, 5 people, again, you can deploy 5 virtual machines in AVD. If you want to just give standard users, again, you can deploy 5 virtual machines. Virtual machines are there, like I say, especially for all your web servers. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, all run Linux servers. And so, again, you could then publish those applications, again, via using container apps, and they'll only have access to those applications as well. So it all depends on your environment. But yes, it's going to be, I think, where the world is heading today, we're going to have a hybrid environment where we'll have on-prem servers and we'll have we'll have virtualization, because we can't move everything to the cloud because of compliance and government regulations. To give you an example, if you're in the US, it is illegal to move data out of the US to another country, in some states as well. For example, if I'm in Texas and I want to move data to a virtual machine in Chicago, if it's financial data or banking data, I've got to get, or medical data, I've got to get approval, because it's leaving the state. You can't just do that. So there's those regulations that come into play as well. And as you start working with IT and you are architecting stuff and you're deploying your VMs, this is where you need to ask questions like, for example, what stuff can I put in the cloud and what stuff can I not put in the cloud? So again, there's a lot of things that come into play when it comes to doing that. People think as an IT person that you just fix some broken stuff every day. No, you do documentation, you do research, you're looking at upgrading your systems. You're also taking into account IT law, governance and policy and security, because if thing hits, as you know, if stuff goes sideways, you'll be the one that they'll blame. Well, why don't you tell us? I'll give you a good example. Visa in India moved all their financial data, was being saved in Azure Cloud in the US. They were fined $1 billion for government for moving data, and had to bring all that data back. So for data residency and compliance, sometimes people just don't put stuff on the cloud. It sits on your local server. And again, that is something that you need to work with your environment. Some stuff can go in the cloud, but some stuff can't. People think, well, Azure and AWS and Google Cloud, cloud is the silver lining. Well, no, it's not. It's a very big misconception that the cloud is the best for everything. It's not. It just depends on your environment. That's why people will have Windows servers in their offices. And again, you may have financial payroll application data you don't want in the cloud. So you might have that payroll data sitting on a server in your office, but you'd have network shares in Azure, file shares, where you would share stuff between other financial departments. So again, you would use AVD storage because AVD storage accounts can replace file servers. Will file servers ever go away? The answer is no. It complements stuff. So again, it's doing what you've done, asking these questions. Hey, and no matter how silly it sounds, don't be afraid to say, well, explain it to me again. Explain it to me again. And say, oh, I'll give you a real example. We were in a big meeting with a well-known organization that sends stuff into space. And there was this one guy came and said, oh, if you do this and this, it can save money. And I said, well, I still don't understand what you're trying to mean. And everyone was nodding and agreeing with the person until I put mine and said, well, can you explain that? And then stopped explaining that again. Eventually, everyone was like, Ryan, you're holding up this whole meeting. I said, no, I want to understand. And it worked out. We didn't actually need that application. But no one said anything because they're all nodding their head and they don't want to look like silly plonkers. Then only afterwards, it's like, yeah, I was going to say that as well. But, I was just waiting for someone else to say it. I'm like, well, hang on, we're not in school. This is our jobs. This is our reputation. And again, if I say, oh, he or she still doesn't get it. Well, not everybody learns the same. Everybody's different. Be patient, explain. It may be easy for you because you've done it. I haven't. So explain to me why we're using it, where we're using it, and what's the reason we're using it for. Then you can make a better decision. Well, actually, no, we don't need that. Or, hey, yes, actually, I do need that. Or, hang on, that's quite expensive. Let's find another alternative.
I just wanted to say, so earlier you had said good engineers. So I just added one on to your list. You said patience, documentation. I included put your name on everything you do, understanding the company's and regional governance.
Yes.
Exclamation point.
Yes, that is so important because with security now and stuff, and believe it or not, a lot of companies get hit with ransomware and stuff. You don't hear about it in the news. For some of them you do because people leak information, but a lot of it you don't hear about. And the reason you don't hear about it is because the stock price will fall and it damages the company's reputation. So let's contain it in-house and try and fix it in-house and be as quiet as possible. So that is why you don't. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants to spend money on IT security. So sometimes too much security is a bad thing. Too little security is also a bad thing. So you have to find. So you have to find a medium, and that can be quite hard at the end of the day. But like say Azure with your AVD stuff, it's already protected out the box with a lot of stuff. So you don't have to worry about that. Same with your virtual machines, because it's got that NSG, those network security groups, it's got your firewalls, there's stuff already in play. Of course, you have your on-prem firewalls and your on-prem things, locking stuff down with group policy on your local servers, granting admin access to only those people that need it. If people leave the company, do not delete their accounts, disable them for 6 months. Because they may come back. Because if you delete that account, you're going to wipe all their email data and everything. Because as you know, if you're running an on-prem server, they'll use Microsoft Exchange. And of course, the moment you delete the account, goodbye emails and history and everything. So you want to archive it. If you've got users that are using Office 365, they've left the company, convert their mailbox to an offline mailbox. It's free, and you're not paying for that license. And you're not thinking, well, how do I back up this data? And not only that, you can share that mailbox to a manager, so you still have access to that email, and Microsoft won't charge you any extra for it. It's free. So a lot of people don't know about certain things, but yeah, there are things that you need to weigh up with your environment when you are deploying Azure AVD. Do we have enough Office licenses? Do I need an AVD with Office? Am I deploying a Windows server into my desktop environment? Again, these are all these things that come into play. Is that server going to be syncing back? I could use AD Connect on my server in my office, run that tool. It will then ask me for Azure credentials, and I could connect to Azure and it will sync up Active Directory, but it only syncs up your user accounts and passwords. It does not sync group policy. It does not sync OUs. It does not do LDAP or Kerberos, because Azure does not support group policy. Azure does not support OUs. So these are things that you need to be aware of. So people say, well, let's just migrate to Azure. Well, hang on, there's a lot of things that come into play when you are migrating at the end. And like I say, with AVDs, it's a good way to get people online using really thin clients, even with 8 gigs of RAM. Yeah.
I think Believe has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you so much for the insights, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So my question goes, with your explanation now, it's so clear that on-premise we still continue while we enjoy the what comes with the cloud environment. So I have on-premise AD, Active Directory. Then I was having Exchange Server on-premise. So I have successfully migrated my Exchange Server to Azure or M365. Now, it's my user. My
Easy.
Azure. Okay.
Just
what?
download AD Connect, and it will replicate all your users into Azure. And it'll also replicate all the passwords.
I have that already in place. All my users are now on Azure, but I cannot reset AD password with Azure. And what I want is having single sign-in for Azure, AD users and email users. My email account.
The cloud.
Right. If you want single sign-on with Azure Active Directory, did you buy an Azure Active Directory license?
Okay.
Oh, so you've answered my question. You don't have an AD license. So you need to get, if you want to use single sign-on with Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory will charge you a license. It's $9 per user. Otherwise, you can't use single sign-on, and you'll be, a lot of the features you want to use available. That is how Microsoft make their money. So you'd have to buy what we call an Active Directory license. So if you look at my screen, I'm going to bounce into Active Directory. Let me, my screen should still be shared. So as you can see now, I've gone into Azure Active Directory. I come into licenses. And if I come down into my licensed features, you can see now what licenses allow you to do. And if you want password protection and you want that single sign-on, you have to get a P2 license or a P1 license. Conditional access or requires license. Certain things you can do for free, but some things you're going to have to pay for, in terms of like single sign-on. You would have to go over here and get that license. And you can see here, we've got P2 licenses and E5 licenses. And your licenses can vary from, they start at about $9 New Zealand dollars per user. So there are many ways around that. So you see, like you talk about your password reset and unlock requires a license. So again, here it says these settings are self-password reset, requires authentication to reset their password. You can go and turn that on. Have you turned that on? You can go ahead and turn that on. If I turn that on, it's going to ask me for an AD license. So this means, again, any admins are always enable self-server password. Admins can, but it's your users that will phone you at 1 o'clock. I can't log on because you don't have an AD license. You can go ahead and turn that on and click save, and that would go ahead and